Good afternoon, everyone. We're glad you can join us again today. This is the third session in our webinar series on financial wellness. Today in this session on retirement planning, your golden years, you will gain an understanding of how to address critical questions on pension assets, Social Security payments, healthcare costs, and retirement savings for your spouse or the next generation. At this time, I would like to read the AFSA Code of Conduct. AFSA is committed to providing an environment free from discrimination and harassment. We ask all meeting participants to embrace our values of equity and equality and conduct themselves in this meeting consistent with those values. At every AFSA meeting, an officer will assign 2 designees as the first point of contact for everyone who thinks they have been experienced discriminatory, harassing, or otherwise unacceptable behavior. We urge you to contact an appointed designee should you have any concerns, and today they are Florida Woods, and you can see her email address, and Nick Spina and his email address. Now we're going to look at Zoom etiquette. Excuse me. Okay, you click there to turn on your and off your camera, and then make sure your audio is muted. It should have a red line through it. I want you to note that in order to get into the chat room, you click here to open the chat feature. If you want to ask a question or make a comment. When you get to chat, you will see an upside down small triangle to click on and pull down the names of all the participants. If you want your questions to be anonymous, click on Fritz Miller. I would like to introduce you to Fritz Miller right now. He is an experienced services professional who maintains a strong client relationship as he uses in-depth analysis to tailor a plan that is unique to your financial priorities and goals. Fritz?
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you, Wendy, for that introduction. And of course, Paul, our technology specialist. Well, we went through 2 sessions so far, and the feedback has been really positive and tremendous. I want to thank everybody for their feedback and most certainly your questions and participation. Today's session, as Wendy mentioned, deals with retirement planning. And I must say that based on my 23 years of experience and observations, working with the team of specialists that I have with me today, I can tell you truly that retirement, in my opinion, is not a function of age. I've seen a lot of clients work with a diverse pool of folks. Retirement is not a function of age, as far as I'm concerned. It's a function of how well you have invested, how well you have managed your financial resources, including debt management, prior to entering retirement. Most people think about retirement on a quantitative side. We're going to talk about that. You get a better understanding of that when you get your investment statements, you get your pension statements. These are all numerical numbers, and you're like, okay, I'm doing well. Sometimes and oftentimes what I've discovered, people forget about the qualitative side of retirement planning. Healthcare is a major, major issue when you talk about retirement planning. Your lifestyle, what type of lifestyle you want to have. Do you want to visit your grandkids? Do you want to travel? Do you want to do volunteer work? There are a number of lifestyle issues that people sometimes often neglect when we talk about retirement planning. And that's one of the things that we do here at Janney, our team. We're really dedicated to helping our clients see the holistic approach with retirement planning. If you work all your life, and there's one thing from my experience of working with teachers and other college professors over the years, you understand the importance of starting early. Starting early, having a disciplined process, have a plan, and an action. And that's where we come in. Today, I'm really, really excited. In session one, you heard from Laura McDegovich. She's going to walk us through retirement planning and some of the issues that Wendy had talked about. I've also asked in our last session, risk management, Peter Longo, as well as Mike Cianci. They'll be available in our Q&A session. If you recall, in our last session, we talked about long-term care, we talked about insurance, and we also talked about annuities. All of these are just tools that we use as part of the planning process. And again, if you have any questions, we encourage questions. We did receive a number of questions, which we will address at the Q&A session. But if you have questions, please submit those questions to Fitz Miller. Go into the chat, Fitz Miller, and send your questions, and we will entertain them at the end. Without further ado, I'd like to turn this over to our CFP, Laura McDegovich. Laura?
Hi there. Thank you for that very nice introduction, Fitz. And welcome, AFSA. I don't know if I can say AFSA. There you go. Thank you, AFSA, for joining us here for this presentation. Test drive your retirement, making your retirement income and resources last. And what is it about? Well, you guessed it, it's about retirement. You saved and you planned and you're almost there, you're ready to retire, but what's that going to look like? Or maybe you just recently retired and you're not sure if that was the right decision. In either case, now's the time to look at your retirement resources, determine your potential retirement income, and consider how to make all of your income last for the rest of your life. Now, my goal here tonight is to go through this, kind of pre-done presentation fairly quickly, because I want to make sure that we leave plenty of time for Q&A at the end. It's always been my experience that people have individual questions, and I want to make sure we can address those for you, okay? So, Paul, next slide, please. All right, so here we have some of the difficult questions, and I would suggest that this is just a handful of them. There's probably plenty more as well. Today, we're going to talk about, have you saved enough for retirement? Are you saving enough if you're not quite there yet? What are your different retirement income sources? And what are your retirement income spending goals? Are they realistic? And within that, are your spending goals, I'm going to suggest they should be, both essentials as well as discretionary pieces. And then we're going to look at what about all of your different assets, and all those assets going to last you through your entire retirement, and what's that actually going to look like, right? Like if I stop working, my paycheck ends, where does the income come from? That's the big question. Give me my income. Where's it going to come from? We're going to answer some of those questions for you. And then, of course, how do you monitor this over time to make sure that your investments and your spending during retirement are continue to be on track? So just to kind of remind those people that maybe weren't on the very first presentation that we did on financial wellness about financial planning, I consider the financial plan to be your roadmap. This is where you are now, this is where you want to be in the future, and these are the steps you need to take in order to help you get there, right? It's really about that roadmap to make sure that your financial future is going to be able to be obtainable in the future. And at the same time, we're going to look at what are the roadblocks, what are the challenges, what are the potholes, and how can we swerve around them to make sure you can get to where you want to get to in retirement. Next slide, please. So, as we know, retirement can be both exciting and it can be a daunting next chapter in your life, right? Sometimes it's something we've been looking forward to our entire lives, and other people are just kind of going, you know what, I don't know, is this really where I want to go? Is this really going to be the next chapter, right? Oftentimes we think about retirement from a financial perspective, but I'm going to talk about it a little bit about from an engagement perspective, right? I mean, let's think about what you want to do with your time. And I bring that up because last weekend, I spent time doing what I do every year in the springtime. I was at the Warren Buffett shareholder meeting, which is known as Woodstock for Capitalists, for those of you that have never attended. It's what got me going when I started hearing that term. And just to let you know, here are two of the richer people in the entire planet. Warren Buffett, he's 90 years old. His partner, Charlie Munger, 97.
Gee.
And they're not stopping. Right? They've got more money than any of us can imagine having. They could go and buy the private islands and do whatever they want to do, but they love doing what they do. And I share this with you because you guys you're working with students. This is oftentimes things that you really enjoy what you're doing as well. So I know sometimes people feel like they're supposed to retire, but I challenge that notion sometimes because, you know, it's about being engaged mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. How do you stay engaged with your mind and enjoy what you're doing? Okay, I'm off my soapbox. I'll get back to the financial piece, but I just want you to know that in my opinion, you know, good financial planning is holistic. It's all those pieces together. So as you're thinking about this next chapter of your life, what are some of the risks? Not saving enough for retirement. That would be the first one. Retiring too soon. Again, that's something you want to make sure you don't do. Overspending during retirement. These are all the different pieces that are actually under your control. And especially during COVID, I think we learned that, in my opinion, very little of my life was under my control. It was an illusion what I thought I could control, right? And when you think about retirement or opening up a new chapter of your life, you're like, well, okay, these are the things I can control. I can control putting more money into my retirement. I can choose to work a couple of years more, and I can certainly choose how much money I'm going to spend in my retirement, right? But now let's look at the things that you can't control. Well, what you can't control is longevity. Nobody really knows when they're going to be taking their last breath, right? Some people tell me, oh, don't worry, Laura, everybody in my family dies really young, right? Well, guess what? Piece here, they're going to tell you that the actuarial tables are going to tell you you're going to live longer and longer. We're going to get into that later on. So really, you need to plan on living a nice, long life and want to make sure that your money is going to last you the entire time. And then we have the inflation risk. You know, that's always a risk from a planning perspective, but it's kind of been really tapped down, I should say, for the past, 10, 15 years. And this is something that's really starting to gain momentum and something we need to keep an eye on. And then there's, of course, is the financial markets and what's going to go on with the markets. We've been having an amazing bull market for I don't know how many years now. I stopped counting, 11, however many. But, the markets don't just do this. The markets do this. We learned that from COVID too, right? And then we have the other one, the long-term care event, a long-term illness. In my perspective, you can have the best laid financial plan and it can be quickly derailed by a long-term care event. So those are all the things we need to kind of think about. Next slide, please. So what we're looking at here is different life expectancies, kind of with what I spoke about earlier, right? Looking at the risk of having your money run out before your breath runs out, right? So just as an FYI, when we're doing a financial plan, I always have that financial plan run until at least age 90 and sometimes even later, because again, the last thing we want to do is suggest that you're going to die at age 80 and you're alive and kicking at 95 and we didn't plan for it. Again, when you're doing a financial plan, you want to be very conservative. And one of those ways to be conservative is to have a longer longevity, right? Because as we can see here, the longer you live, the longer the chances are that you're going to live, right? And these are the figures that we can see here from the Department of Health and Human Services, right? So you can see you should plan on retiring at least 20 years, and I would suggest 20 to 30 years in retirement, depending on how old you are when you choose to retire. Because again, you want to make sure that not only do you have the money for your basic retirement needs, but what about some of those uh-oh moments? If any of you tuned in early, you heard Paul and myself talk about some house issues that have been going on, right? Paul had some significant house issues that put him out of his house for 2 years. You want to make sure that you've got some money put aside in case those kind of calamities happen to you. Next slide, please. All right, and go ahead and click the next one as well, please, Paul. All right, so here what we're looking at is the inflation risk, right? So over the past 20 years or so, overall inflation, as measured by the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, has only averaged about 2.1%. But over time, even this low inflation rate can still have a significant impact on your spending, right? So just take a look at the graph and you can see healthcare expenses, right? So this is why it's important to think about inflation when we're thinking about the future. Next slide, please. And go ahead and click it again. Excellent, thank you. So what you can see here is how inflation can negatively impact your retirement investments. For example, when inflation is low, interest rates paid on fixed income investments such as certificates of deposit, savings account, U.S. Treasury securities, these are all very low. And what does that mean? That means you're going to earn much less as well. And by looking at this graph, we can see how someone who retired in 2000 or 2006, expecting $5,000 a year from his or her fixed income investments, would have had some really lean years, right? And the reason we're showing you this is oftentimes people think, oh, well, I'm just going to retire and put all my money into fixed income. That's a really safe and secure investment. Yes and no. Because if you're going to put everything into one basket, you've got some other risk you're taking on, not to mention you're probably not going to be able to keep pace with inflation and your spending. So, next slide, please. There you go, right. So obviously when it comes to, thinking about your portfolio in retirement, diversification really is the place you want to be. Continuing to invest a portion of your assets in the stock market while you're in retirement will help it keep pace with inflation. But of course, stock performance can be what? Volatile, right? So withdrawing even a relatively small amount from your portfolio when the retirement at the wrong time, when the stock market is down, can really be detrimental to your retirement spending. And it can cause your assets to be depleted much more quickly. This is referred to as the sequence of return risk, right? So fixed income returns have been much more consistent over time. But again, we just saw how the past 20 years, fixed income investments were much lower, right? So what do? Really, we think a combination of the two is what makes the most sense. I'm not sure if you've heard of the term 60-40 portfolio, which means about 60% of your portfolio in stocks and 40% of your portfolio in bonds. And if you look at a portfolio like that, which you're going to see here, over a 20-year time frame, it could have helped that same investor avoid some of the stock market highs as well as some of the troughs and realize about the same sort of return as they would have at a plain 100% equity investment. And just to keep in mind, when we're talking 100% equity investment, if you think about risk tolerance on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the riskiest and 1 being the least amount of risk, 100% stock portfolio is at 5, right? Whereas a 60-40 is a good 2.5, maybe a 3. That's why we're suggesting that if you do a 60-40 stock portfolio, you might get about the same rate of return, but with a heck of a lot less risk, which of course is what we want when we're in retirement. Next slide, please. So now we're looking at one of the other risks that I was talking about, which is the long-term care costs, right? So here what we're looking at is that the final retirement risk that's not in your control, long-term care. No one likes to think about needing long-term care services, but it's been my experience that most people have either had a family member or they have a friend who's had a family member who's had some significant long-term care events, and they know the burden and the cost of a long-term care event and how that can affect the family. And here you're seeing some of those numbers. And interestingly, according to information on longtermcare.gov, which by the way is a great government website, they give you all kinds of information about long-term care, 70% of people age 65 or over may need long-term care at some point in their life. So again, let me repeat that. I'm going to take a sip of water.
Yep.
Okay. So here we are. Almost 70% of people, excuse me, age 65 or over may need long-term care at some point before they die. Excuse me for just a moment.
Are you okay?
We lost the audio. Can't hear you. Yeah, Laura, we can't hear you.
I just sent her a message.
Oh, thank you.
While Laura is getting her audio back together, what this slide is showing is the cost of long-term care. And you can see from the different facilities. And I don't have to tell anybody on this call, I think you've seen nationwide some of the issues and challenges that people had in long-term care facilities with this COVID-19 issue and concern. Unfortunately, there was some deaths and other issues. Having said that, one of the things families are looking at now is to really consider, do I stay at home, but I still need long-term care? And so that is an issue that we also cover in the planning phase as well. So long-term care, as Laura was mentioning, is very, very important, as I said at the top. These are what I call qualitative retirement lifestyle issues. If you're faced with one, we're going to have to deal with it, and hopefully we'll deal with it in the best way for you. Laura, are you back? I see her coming on here. Peter, you have anything you want to share on this long-term care? You're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Okay.
Yay, there you are,
Do I
Laura.
sound like a
Yes.
commercial now? Sorry
Yeah,
about
you-
that, ladies and
You
gentlemen.
can hear me too,
So
right?
sorry.
Problem.
Okay, here we go. All right, sorry about that. Really, I'm a Luddite, not sure what I did. But anyway, you get the idea. Long-term care is a really important piece of your retirement planning, because if long-term care event, your finances are really going to suffer for it. Next slide, please. And this is kind of like what I was talking about before, right? Retirement looks different for everybody. Maybe what you're really going to do is retire and have an encore career and go and do something different. Or maybe you're just going to continue to stay and work a little bit longer because you know what? You really enjoy the children. You really enjoy your colleagues. And if COVID taught you anything, you love your family, but come on, how much time can you spend with them? Okay, that was a joke, Wendy. You were supposed to laugh at that point. But anyway.
I'm sorry. It's a little delayed here.
That's okay. I'm just saying. Wendy's my laugh track that I asked for. So And what is really important to think about, people tend to be delaying retirement. And sometimes they do that because they have a feeling that they need a little bit more for retirement and they're not financially secure. But sometimes it can be because they really enjoy working, right? And you could see some of those statistics, right? Or maybe they're saying, you know what, I'm now done and I'm going to go and I'm going to volunteer because that's what I enjoy most, whatever it may be. But I would suggest as a planner, once you put the numbers pen to paper and actually create a financial plan and go, wow, okay, you know what, I could have retired 2 years ago, or guess what, I need to work a couple more years before I can retire. Either way, knowing that information, that's power, right? That's a powerful piece to think about. Let's go to the next slide, please. And this is the other side of the coin that I think it's really important for people to think about, right? Oftentimes I hear people say, oh, Laura, I'm going to work until I'm 65. I'm going to work till I'm 67. I'm going to work till I'm 70. But guess what? The average age people retire tends to be age 62 or less. And oftentimes it's not by their own choice. It's because they've either had a healthcare risk, or there's been a downsize at corporate America, or the company they worked for has gone out of business, or maybe they've had to take a leave of absence from work to take care for a family member, right? A spouse or a parent or somebody else. So it's really important to think that maybe you are planning on retiring later, but let's be conservative and run the numbers that you're going to retire earlier just to kind of be on the safe side and see what might happen. Next slide, please. Now we're going to talk about retirement income. And again, not all income is created equal, as they say, right? So there's a couple different types of retirement income. There's the guaranteed income, and that's just like having your paycheck come right back. You never stop getting a paycheck. You're just getting it from somebody else, a guaranteed income. It pays a reliable set amount and at regular intervals. Now, I know who I'm talking to here, and you guys are well aware of what a guaranteed income source is, and that's your pension, right?
Wonderful.
And that's a perfectly wonderful type of guaranteed income. And you're going to see in some following slides, I think I mentioned it before, how rare pensions are today. So it's really important to you guys to be aware how lucky you are to be able to have those pensions. And just to remember again, I know I mentioned it at the in the first meeting, that we really think of retirement income coming from three different sources. They call it a three-legged stool, right? So the first source is your pension, the second source is your Social Security, and the third source is your own individual savings, right? And when we're looking at guaranteed income sources, you guys already have two of those three. And two of those are guaranteed income sources, pension and Social Security. And again, most people today in our country don't have pensions, only about 35%. Because the non-guaranteed income, I want to make sure I'm talking about that. That's generally from your regular investments that, again, are going to go up and down with the stock market, right? And there's going to be variable income from that. But there can also be value in having that non-guaranteed income because, again, it might not only keep pace with inflation, but it can increase in addition to inflation and really help with some of that discretionary spending pieces. So it's good to have both. Next slide, please. So here again, we're looking at the different types of guaranteed income, right? And we already talked about the pensions and how lucky you guys are that you actually have pensions. And if you haven't looked at them, and I hope I'm not getting anyone in trouble, but I certainly do encourage you to go to your pension administrator and ask for some numbers, ask them to run some of the different benefit calculations. Oftentimes it's like, if I retire now, I'd get this amount. If I retire at a later date, I'd get this amount. And then you always want to also look at, is it a joint and survivor? Am I going to be getting this pension for not only my life, but also for the life of my spouse? Am I going to get 100% joint and survivor? Is it going to be a portion of it? What's that going to look like? The other one that you need to think about is Social Security. So if you haven't already done so, I encourage you to go to FSA.gov and sign up for your own personal Social Security account and log in. And by doing that, you can actually get a copy of your most current Social Security statement. You can look at your earnings history. There's a lot of really cool calculators. If you want to geek out and look at them, you can play around with those. It used to be that the Social Security Administration sent you your Social Security statement every few years. And during the Great Recession, for cost-cutting measures, they pulled back on that. And now they tend to send it to you really kind of on your milestones and the closer you get to retirement. But rather than waiting for that to come in the mail, just go to ssa.gov and you can go ahead and get your own. And to just kind of remind you a little bit about the Social Security payments that you can get, you can usually get them as early as age 62. But again, if you take it at age 62, you're going to be getting a guaranteed haircut on your income benefits because you're going to be locking in that lower rate for the rest of your life. Or you can wait until full retirement age 67, or from age 67 to age 70. If you wait until age 70, the highest age you can wait to get Social Security, from 67 to 70, Social Security increases, your benefits increase by 8% a year guaranteed. And I'm here to tell you that there is no place that you can get a guaranteed 8% increase at zero cost. It's not a true zero cost because actually you're having to pull assets from other sources, like maybe a personal annuity or from your pensions or from somewhere else to help subsidize that. But it's a really important piece to consider and think about. And by the way, you know, if you're interested in figuring out when is the best time for me to actually take Social Security, and again, what about my spouse and I together, we can run some numbers for you. And we have something called a Social Security Optimizer that we'd be happy to run those numbers and help you figure out what makes the most sense for you and your family. Next slide, please. So the non-guaranteed retirement income, what does that mean? Well, that's really your own regular investment accounts. Those are your IRAs, your 403Bs, 457s, 401Ks. That could be maybe some real estate that you've invested in and you're getting some rental income from your real estate. It can be perhaps working part-time in retirement. It could be all those kind of pieces that you see on the slide here that can actually create that non-guaranteed income source. And again, what we're looking for is kind of a parity between your guaranteed and your non-guaranteed income sources. Next slide, please. So here what we're looking at is kind of, it's an interesting way of looking at it. So this is, remember I talked about the three-legged stool? That's kind of what we're looking at on the income on the right-hand side. So we have the pension and the Social Security. And we'd love for those two pieces to actually cover all of your basic living expenses. And then we have your investments, and your investments are going to be for more of your discretionary spending, all that extra spending that you might want to do, right? Because we know when we think about our spending, we have both our needs versus our wants, or I like to call it your living expenses versus your lifestyle expenses. And you can see the different pieces that we've got listed here. For living expenses, those are just your basic, you know, your food, your housing, transportation, healthcare costs, debts, mortgages, car payments, and then the unexpected expenses. They really should detail those out a little more, like say, you know what, paying for my grandkids' college education, going on the trip with all of my friends, going on vacations, you know, whatever it may be. Checking everything off of my bucket list. That would be part of that discretionary spending piece down there. Next slide, please. So one of the things you might want to think about looking at is, you know, so here's my guaranteed income sources. Here's my non-guaranteed income sources. And what's the gap? What's that look like? You know, what it looks like. What if it looks like your guaranteed income isn't going to cover your basic living expenses? What are some of the strategies and what's the next steps? Well, one of them could be that you want to think about what your guaranteed income, what your actual basic essential living expenses are, and are there some ways that you could start to pull back on that, right? Oftentimes, one of the things people tend to do in retirement is they downsize their homes because they kind of get to a point in time when they're like, you know what, I am so tired of maintaining this house and worrying about the outdoors and the gutters and the yard and the garden and all that. And it was fine for the first 15 years of retirement, but then I got to a point where, like, you know what? Well, okay. For those of you in California, don't listen to it. But for those of you in the Northeast, I got really tired of shoveling the snow and dealing with having to pay somebody to plow out my driveway, right?
Yeah.
So those are some real life, this is maintaining your home. It can be really costly. So maybe you want to downsize your home. It does talk about cashing in a life insurance policy. I would suggest not doing any of that, of cashing in a policy, until you've actually had a deep conversation with people like Fitz and Pete Longo, and they can actually do some in-force illustrations for you and see if maybe you could actually get the same amount of insurance, but at a lower cost. Because again, actuarial tables, and I'm sorry, that's probably a jargon term that we use in our industry. The basic actuarial tables, what that means is people are living longer. And because you're living longer, if you have a life insurance policy that you purchased 20 or 30 years ago, you very well may be able to take that same policy and convert it into another policy to get the same amount of death benefit for a lower price. It's an important thing to kind of think about. Next slide, please. I got muted again. I don't know why. Oh, this is an optional slide. So here we go. So there you go. Plan for your withdrawals. Well, we could talk about the immediate annuity. It's important to think about an immediate annuity. Again, I know you guys already have annuities and you have pensions, but it's really important to think about what an immediate annuity can do for you. So if you're finding that there's going to be a shortfall with your guaranteed income, one option is to say, you know what, let's take some of that non-guaranteed income sources and turn it into a guaranteed income by purchasing what they call an immediate income annuity. And what you could do by that, you could use it with your IRAs, you could use it with, again, some life insurance policies, you could use it with just cash that you have sitting in your savings account, earning 0.001% if you're lucky. Right? And by getting an immediate annuity, what you're doing is you're taking this money, you're putting it into an annuity, and you're getting an immediate income stream from it that you cannot outlive. That's the purpose of having an immediate annuity. It could be a really valuable piece if the fact patterns line up and if it makes sense for you in your own personal situation. Next slide, please. So the next piece is thinking about your withdrawals. Right? So again, we talked about the guaranteed, and this is that non-guaranteed income piece. So, when it looks like your non-guaranteed income, what is that going to look like from a retirement withdrawal standpoint, right? Again, we want to make sure that we're kind of looking at everything together. We're going to take your pension, we're going to take your Social Security, and then we're going to look, what's the shortfall, what's the gap, and we're going to pull from that from your regular investments, right? And we're going to take some of that each month to make sure or meeting any shortfall that you might have between your pension and your Social Security. And again, if you had an immediate annuity, that would fill in there as well. And when you're thinking about those withdrawals, you want to think about, what are some of the ways that you can actually minimize any issues with the withdrawals from your non-guaranteed income pieces. And part of what we're looking at is don't withdraw too much too soon. Set the withdrawal rate and then stick with it. And what's another way of saying that? Once you've had your retirement income spending plan put in place, i.e. your budget, don't go over it. That's one of the important pieces. Once you've figured out what your spending is, don't go over it. And if you find that you are spending a bit too much on your discretionary spending, well, this is the time to kind of pull back on it and go, maybe we need to rethink about what we're doing and what's important to us, right? Next piece, please. So it's really important, and once we're looking at all of these pieces, that we're staying on top of it. You want to stay on top of what your income needs are, your retirement resources are, and make sure that they're going to last you. And you want to monitor your investments, reevaluate the assumptions, determine if you're invested appropriately, maybe rebalance your portfolio. And you want to do this on a regular basis to make sure that all the different pieces of your retirement income pie are working together for you. Again, we think you should do a retirement plan once every 2 years at a minimum, you know? And for most people, early retirement is a really active time, right? That's when they tend to be, as you can see how the spending tends to go down like a ladder here, right? Can get tiered down. So when we think about our early retirement years, that's when we're really going on vacation. That's where we're spending more time with our friends. Maybe we're fixing up the house. We're doing all of the things that tend to cost a little bit more money. And then as we tend to get older, things start to slow down. We've been to all the places on our bucket list. And maybe now it's really when we think, you know, now it's time for the kids and the grandkids to come and visit me. I'm not going to be traveling quite as much. And then you might get to a time where you're just going, you know what, I really don't even want to travel for the holidays. Again, I want people to come and visit me. And, you know, one way I kind of look at this, there's a great phrase that I pulled from a book called The Number years ago. And the author puts it quite succinctly. He calls it the go-go years, the slow-go years, and the no-go years. And I love that. Thank you for laughing, Wendy. Thank you. And I love the term because it's so easy for us to get. And it also rhymes, right? Go-go, slow-go, no-go. So we know in the go-go years, that's where I'm going, man. I'm checking everything off the bucket list. I'm going everywhere I want to go. And then slow-go, that's, you know, maybe I'm not going to go quite as much. I'll maybe travel a couple times a year. And then you get to the no-go years, and that's when you're just like, man, that idea of pulling out that suitcase and packing it, that doesn't sound like a vacation. That sounds like work, right? So when we think about that with our spending, that can be an important piece to think about. Wow, I'm going to spend more in the early part of my retirement, but I'm probably going to spend a lot less in the latter part of my retirement. But I do have a caveat. You need to think that you're going to spend a lot less in the latter part of your retirement as long as you have a good, solid long-term care policy put in place. Because otherwise, it could be that you're spending more in the beginning of retirement. And then as you're getting closer to the end of retirement, that's when your healthcare costs could really go up with a long-term care event. So just need to make sure we're thinking about things from a 360-degree view. Next slide, please. So monitor and evaluate. That's the main piece when you're putting together a financial plan. We're going to say, let's look at all the different assets, look at all the income sources, let's look at all the expenditures, and now let's make sure that we're reevaluating and looking at this every couple of years. Because guess what? What if the market goes down? How is that going to impact me? Well, guess what? If you've got a pension and you've got an annuity and you've got guaranteed streams of income, you don't have to worry nearly as much as you do for those people that don't have those pieces, because those are going to stay the same for you regardless. And that's the value of having that, right? But maybe you're going to say, you know what, my medical expenses really are going up. And your medical expenses can start to go up way before long-term care is even an issue. So you need to make sure you're thinking about those pieces as well. And again, if you need to, maybe you're going to need to pull back on your withdrawals from your non-guaranteed income sources because you need to make sure your money is going to last. Next slide, please. And this is when we're thinking about, again, how is that non-guaranteed income going to be invested? And oftentimes, again, we think that a 60-40 mix is a really good option for you. The pie charts show how an individual's investment portfolio might be invested more conservatively over time. You know, generally stocks are considered to carry a higher risk than fixed income investments. And then, of course, we have cash and cash alternatives, and they considered to carry the least amount of risk of the three major classes. So on the far left-hand side, we have 10 plus years to retirement, and we're seeing 80% in fixed income, 20% in stocks. I would still suggest that that's a little bit of an aggressive portfolio. And then when you get within 5 years of retirement, they're showing about 60% stocks, 40% fixed income. And then once you're in retirement, they're kind of flipping it and saying, well, maybe it's going to be 40% stocks and 60% fixed income. Again, just showing how you're getting a little more conservative as time goes by. And just please be aware that there's no one size fits all portfolio. This is part of why you have people like Fitz to help you go through risk tolerance questions and figure out what makes the most sense for you. And oh, by the way, the risk tolerance you have at age 55 or 60 when you retire may not be the same risk tolerance you have at 75 or 85, right? It's something that's going to continue to change over time and get adjusted. Next slide, please. So again, this is talking about your portfolio and how you might want to think about changing your portfolio over time in order to preserve more principal and help it to produce more income. Again, investing too conservatively, having everything in fixed income, that can be very detrimental as well. And it's really kind of finding that sweet spot that makes the most sense for you and what your fact patterns of your financial situation are. And I'm going to flip through these other ones pretty quickly so we can get to some Q&A. Next slide, please. And again, here we're looking at different considerations, like looking at guaranteed income as an asset class, which again, you guys already have.
Okay.
Okay, I'm here still. I'm learning to mute myself. Next slide, please. And so if you're going to be looking at the guaranteed income from an outside provider, because you guys already have pensions, you're in pretty good shape. But if you're looking at it from an outside provider, the different pieces you need to look at is your age, your risk tolerance, what are some of your legacy goals, how much do you want to be able to leave to your heirs, what's the time frame, what are the actual assets that you're thinking about converting to a guaranteed income stream. Those are the pieces to think about. Next slide, please. Next, click one more time. There you go. So what we see here, this is a snapshot of what part of what our planning process looks like. So this is something called the Retirement Income Estimator. And this is a great tool that helps you kind of take a look at your entire financial picture and make sure that you actually do have enough money to help you last through your entire retirement. And again, we're looking at your assets, your income streams, and the amount of money that's going out all of your outflows. Next slide, please. And by looking at your retirement income, we can help you to actually optimize it. So we can say, okay, this is scenario one. And what about scenario two? Oftentimes when I'm working with retirees, they're like, you know what, Laura, I've been so blessed and I'm so lucky that I've been able to accumulate everything that I've been able to accumulate. What I'm really worried about is my grandkids. What I'm really worried about are my children. Can I take some money and can I give to them $30,000 a year? Can I afford to do that without hurting myself financially? I'd really like to be able to help them. I'd like to be able to help with some college costs. But first and foremost, I want to make sure I'm taking care of me. We can run some of those numbers for you and help you see what makes the most sense, you know? Or maybe you're going to say, you know what, Laura, part of my bucket list was to get that home in Montana. And now I really want to see, can I afford that second home in Montana or wherever it may be? And we can help you run those numbers to see if that makes sense for you as well. Next slide, please. There you go. So what you're seeing here is when we're doing the financial plan, part of what we do is we do sample asset allocation mixes where we're actually looking how much is in large cap, what about mid cap, what about small cap, and all the different sectors. And the goal, of course, is to be allocated across all the sectors and have proper diversification. Next slide, please. And so this is one of the slides that we have also available when we're doing our financial plans. And this is kind of a financial snapshot. And this is a great one because it kind of gives you a snapshot, quote unquote, of everything in one place. What's your goal coverage? Are you able to make your goals? What's your current asset allocation? As you can see here, this person's current rate of return is about 4%. what's their overall net worth, what's your cash flow, and most of all, what is something called your probability of success. And I would suggest when you're doing a financial plan, if anybody's going to do a financial plan that we call something that's called a linear projection, this is, guess what, Laura, you're going to get that 4% rate of return year after year after year after year after year, and everything is going to just work out great. I would say, yeah, well, what happens if then the market turns south? What happens when there's a sequence of return variability? And that's what we do when we do in our financial plans. And we actually do something. You see that piece that says probability of success? That's something that is part and a very important part of our financial plans. That's when we actually ask the software to run 500 different iterations that mimic the sequence of return variability of the stock market, right? And therefore, what we're taking into account is that we know the market doesn't do this, the market does this. So it takes into account all those different returns. And then it says, now how likely is it that you're actually going to be able to make it in retirement? In my humble opinion, that's the most important part of a financial plan. And you can see that we have that as part of the snapshot. Next slide, please. So the goal here is to kind of lay out how important it is to actually think about putting together a plan for your finances before you kind of pull the plug on retirement. So as you can see, here's some of the things that you would need to do if you're wanting to do a plan with us here at Janney. And it's really putting together a list of your expenses and categorize them, your needs and your different wants. And if you need help with that, we've got some sheets that can help you with that. Gathering together all your information of your income sources, again, your pension, your Social Security, and of course, all of your other assets, like any other IRAs, investment accounts, all the different pieces of your financial life. We have a questionnaire, and we'd ask you to kind of put some of those pieces in the questionnaire. You can send it to Fitz, and then Fitz and our planning team can help to put together that retirement plan for you. Next slide, please. So again, what we're going to do is, we can have Fitz can sit down with you and have a discussion with you about what's the initial analysis of your financial plan and what are some of the recommendations and thoughts that he thinks that you could do to actually make your retirement plan that much stronger, right? And once we put together that financial plan for you, by the way, sometimes it takes a couple times. We have like our first draft, we kick the tires, make sure we've done it correctly, and then we'll come back and make sure that this is our final base financial plan, because the goal of creating that baseline financial plan is we're going to update this every couple of years to make sure you're again on track to meet your financial goals. And that's really the end of the slides that we had here for you all tonight. And I kind of rushed through those last ones, but it's really because I wanted to make sure we had some time for some Q&A. So Fitz, if you want to share with us some of the questions that you have.
Yes, thank you, Laura. Thank you. And I if you want to have some water,
Yeah.
you're welcome to have some water.
Good time.
You did a great job. So
Yes.
thank you.
Very good.
Wow, that was good. And hopefully everybody on the call, as educators, if you will, you can really appreciate the importance of being educated when we talk about financial planning, when we talk about retirement planning, and you can see all of the different pieces and components that really go into the work that we do. In the very beginning, Laura talked about a couple of things, okay? Things that you can control and things that you cannot control. You can control whether or not you get a financial plan. You can make a decision, pull your resources together, the statements, the documents that are necessary, and we're offering that consultation to you. You can control that piece. You also can control when you retire and how do you want that retirement to look like. You can control that, right? In terms of your investments, in terms of cutting your expenses. We go through all of that analysis. These are the things that you cannot control. And I stress that to all my clients, and they get it. And I'm quite sure as educators, again, you get it as well. A kid cannot learn if he or she does not go to school. That's just impossible. They have to go to school. They have to do the materials. And that's things that they can control. from that perspective, you can't control longevity. Laura spoke about that. We don't know when the final days are going to be. You cannot control inflation. You cannot control the financial markets and the uncertainty. And most certainly, you cannot control long-term illness. And why do I say that? Before we get to these Q&A, because just to give you perspective, she talked about retirement income. The 10-year Treasury, U.S. Treasury, is paying 10 years 1.564%. So if you were really conservative, you didn't want to take any risk in the stock market, for example, and you put all your money in treasuries, you're going to earn over 10 years 1.56%. And the question is, as Laura pointed out, where do you get the income if you needed to fill a gap of income if you're only earning 1.5%? The numbers won't add up. I can tell you that. A 2-year CD, average 3-year CD is only paying 2.5%, less than 1% for 2 years of putting your money into a bank. You basically are burying it. And again, you can't control inflation. And so you can see that your money is not keeping up with inflation. Relative to the stock market, the S&P year to date is 11.86%. So you already see the allocation in terms of how you can invest in the stock market on an asset allocation perspective, giving you some exposure to the stock market, but at the same time, fixed income. Okay. That's what we go through to show you how it works, to make sure that you're protected and the risk is mitigated. So the S&P, the broad market, year to date is 11.86%. The Dow Jones, which you probably hear on your 6 o'clock news, is 12.88%. And the NASDAQ heavily tech index is up 5.78%. The reason I say that is because when we talk about trying to generate income and retirement, and you still invested, all of these options are at our disposal, these tools. And so I want you to keep that in mind as we continue this Q&A. Now, some of these questions are quite interesting. And the first question, Laura, is I already contribute the max to my 401k plan. Should I begin contributing, and this is a plan with the city, the 457 plan. This is a supplement retirement plan. I'm familiar with these plans. Again, full disclosure, I work with many of you in the education industry, so I'm very familiar with these plans. But the 457 is a supplement plan, is another plan within their structure. They have the option. So he's maxed out in the 401k plan. The question is, should he begin investing in the 457 plan as well?
If you have the discretionary income to do so, I would highly, strongly suggest it. The only negative that I could see from that is, and again, this is me just answering a question kind of in the dark without knowing all the other pieces other than you're maxing out, which is good for you. That's what we should be doing, right? So the worst case scenario is going to be that you're going to have a lot of extra money that's all going to be what they call qualified money, which means it's going to be like pre-tax money. So when you go to pull that money out in retirement, that means you're going to have to pay the tax man at that time. So the only negative could be is that you're going to have a larger bucket of qualified money in retirement. But I always encourage people to tend to save as much as they can in a qualified, tax-deferred, tax-preferred way of saving versus just paying, putting it in the regular stock market. Now, that being said, I'm going to answer the question in two ways. That being said, there can be some value in something that they call, or I like to refer to it as tax diversification in retirement, so that you can have buckets of money that you can pull from. We already talked about like Social Security and pensions and those kind of buckets. But when you're thinking about your own savings accounts, your own investment accounts, it can be nice to have a bucket of money that you can pull from without having to pay the tax man all the time. right? And if you're going to have all your money in the qualified accounts, let's say you want to pull out $10,000 to buy it for a down payment on a car, you're actually going to have to pull out probably $12,000 because 2 is going to go to taxes, right? Whereas if you had $10,000 in a regular investment account, you could just pull that $10,000 out. Yes, there's going to be capital gains, but the taxes are going to be much smaller in comparison.
And in addition to that, and that's great, Laura, thanks. Another option that can be considered, I mean, I use it for myself, for example. If it's after-tax dollars and you're maxed out, consider the Roth. Because when you take that money out of the Roth, it's tax-free. And to Laura's point, we all have Uncle Sam, and we take the money out. Uncle Sam said, "Hey, you owe me some money, right?" And so how do we deal with Uncle Sam? How do we deal with the IRS? So the Roth could be an option, okay, because it's after-tax dollars and there's no tax benefits. So when you pull the money out, it's all tax-free. And a lot of clients are taking advantage of that Roth opportunity.
Absolutely. And my one caveat with that is you have to look at the earned income, because there can be some,
yes.
You might earn too much money, and so you might not be able to put money into a Roth. That's a one caveat you need to think about with that.
Absolutely. Right? Perfect. To you or Peter, I don't know if Mike Cianci got on the call, but Peter, someone asked a question about, can you talk a bit about, and Laura, you may chime in here too, talk about continuing care residential communities. I don't know if it's a question that.
So I'll start off, and if Michael or Pete wanted to.
Yeah, I was able to join. Fitz, I'm here. Sorry about the delay.
Perfect.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Thanks, Mike.
I missed.
Go ahead.
Repeat the question one more time for me.
The question is, are you familiar with continuing care residential communities?
I mean, I'm fairly familiar with them. I believe.
Can we put you up? Where's your picture?
No, I have no picture today. Sorry, I apologize.
Okay, no problem. Not a problem.
So I'm fairly familiar. I believe what the individual asking the question is talking about is a facility or a retirement facility that you buy into. You may pay a lump sum up front. Could be anywhere from, depending on where you live, it could be anywhere from $20,000 up front to well over 6 figures. And then you also pay a monthly or a monthly, almost like a residence fee. And in these facilities, a lot of the time, if you're active, there's an active area of the community, then there's an assisted living care, and then there's possibly a full-time nursing care. So you're all in one location, and you can live in that area and live in that place, entirely. You may just have to change rooms or apartments, or have somebody come to you. But I believe that's what they're talking about, and they are popping up more and more. Everybody looks at it a little bit differently. If that's something you want to do, it's obviously an option. Some people want to stay in their house, right? And that's where a long-term care or a hybrid insurance policy comes into play, because you could have at-home health care, you could have adult daycare, you could have assisted living care. If their question is, will long-term care pay for that? Not initially, right? You have to be able to qualify for the long-term care side and that resident side before you can bring in the associated costs on the long-term care piece.
Okay, perfect. Laura, you want to add anything, or Peter?
I think he did a great job. I would have said something similar.
I thought so.
No, nice job, Mike.
Yep. Thanks, Mike. There's a question that's coming through, so I have a list, and also I'm going through the chat here. Required minimum distributions. Okay, that's a big one, because we had talked in our first session the importance of planning for taxes. A lot of retirees and pre-retirees think that, oh, I'm retired, I have no earned income, and I'm never going to pay taxes again. That's not true. It's not true. In fact, I'm working with a couple of your colleagues now. We're looking at it. Required minimum distributions, that money was never taxed. Laura talked about that before, right? You put it away, you plugged it away. Now you saved all this money. And based on, again, I'm tossing out a term here as Laura used before, actuarial tables, the IRS says, hey, by the way, you're 72. You got to stop paying me. You are required to take that money out. And every year on the required minimum distributions at the beginning of the year, so if the account is $500,000, there's an evaluation at the beginning of the year, and you are required to take out a percentage of that account balance. They amortize it over your life expectancy, and you're required to take that money out. And if you do not take it out by the end of the year, you get a 50% tax. So for example, if you're required to take out $20,000 out of your IRA and you do not, you will get a bill for $10,000. You owe Uncle Sam a bill for $10,000. Now, what we do at Janney, which is really, really good, our clients receive a notification, and then they receive a phone call from my office letting them know what their required minimum distribution calculations are. We calculate that number for our clients. Now, some folks, if you're not working with an advisor and you're doing it on your own, you have to calculate that number yourself, okay? Which, you know, that's a lot of work, to be quite honest, right? You got to keep up with all of the different accounts that you have, do the calculation, and then you take out that amount. Laura, is that about right?
That's excellent, excellent. And I was going to say, you know, to add to that, if you are one of those lucky people that you have this required minimum distribution that you have to take, but you don't really need that extra income, this can be a great way to say, you know what, I'm going to take some of this money and maybe I'm going to, again, put money into a 529 plan for my grandchildren because I think education is so important. So I can take some of the money and pay for their college, prepay for the college, right, with a 529. Another option could be, you know what, if I've got all this money that I quote unquote have to take, I have to take the money out, I'm going to take that money and I'm going to use that to buy my long-term care policy that I didn't think I could really afford. And now I'm going to take that extra money and I'm going to use it for that. There's a lot of different ways of kind of thinking, what are you going to do with that required minimum distribution? And then for some people that are really fortunate and they're very charitably inclined and they really don't want to have to pay the tax man and they really don't want to have to take that money, each year they can actually take up to $100,000 after you get to age 70 and a half. You could take up to $100,000 from your retirement account and have it go directly to a charity. I know my picture's frozen, but don't worry, I'm still here and I'm not coughing, so that's good. So anyway, but it's called a qualified charitable distribution, and that's a really nice option too. And then I'm just naming a couple of different options that you could do with those required minimum distributions. And I believe I mentioned this earlier, but I can't remember if I did in the first session or not, so I'm just going to mention it now. So, you know, conventional wisdom is that you wait until the last possible moment to take the money out of your retirement account. Again, age 72 until the IRS comes knocking and tells you you have to. But oftentimes when we're doing a financial plan and we actually look at the numbers, we can actually see, you know what, it makes sense. You're actually going to retire at age 60. You're not going to be taking your required minimum distribution until age 72. But guess what? You've got about like 10 years between 60 and age 70 if you postpone taking Social Security, when you're in a much lower tax bracket. And even though it's counterintuitive, it might make sense to start to accelerate and take some of your money out of your retirement account earlier so you can spread out the tax liability over more years. And I'm seeing Ernie nodding his head like, yep, that's a good idea. I don't know if he's in that category or not, or he's thought about it, but it really is a powerful idea to spread the tax liability.
That's perfect. Thank you, Laura. Peter, there's a question here that's asked, could you explain immediate income annuity? Now there's a caveat here. If one is already retired, is that still an option?
Yeah, I could take that, Fitz. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yep.
Okay, good. So, yeah, so Laura went into that in her presentation a little bit. There were a few slides about immediate annuities and income. So, immediate income annuity basically is you could take money, um, invest it with an insurance company. One of the features that we have here at Janney is we have a tool that we can go shop 20, 30 different companies and try and find the best quotes to get you the best income stream. So what an immediate income annuity is you hand the money to an insurance company. They're going to, in exchange for a lump sum, they are going to give you a series of systematic payments, usually for life. You could do it for the life of you and your spouse. You could do it for a 12-year period and have it stop. So some people will say, hey, I'm getting a buyout from my company in 12 years. I need some income in the meantime. I want a 12-year immediate annuity. Here's, some companies will give them money and say, here you go. We're going to pay it over 12 years. And then down the road, you can do it. Or you can invest your own money and go that route. So the answer is, if you are already retired, it is absolutely still an option. You would just take your own money and go invest in that. Now, some people will take their rollover. That's very similar to the concept of your pension. That's all you're really doing is your pension is money's going into that account, and then they're going to base it on your actuary lifetime as to how long you're supposed to live. They're going to give you a guaranteed income stream. If you live shorter, there may or may not be any money for your family. If you live longer and run out of money, that's the benefit of the annuity. The check's going to keep coming as long as you're breathing. Hopefully that answered your question.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I got a similar question that came up that followed up with Laura a few moments ago with these RMDs. And again, if you don't need the money in RMDs, yes, you can use that money to fund the trust. I have examples where I have clients who are paying for their grandkids' college education because they don't need their required minimum distributions. Laura pointed out in terms of your charitable giving. So yes, one of the key things about financial planning and the consultation that we do, you get an opportunity to discover and have these conversations to your unique situation. And we do our very best, to guide you through the process and walk you through, as she pointed out, through all of the documentations here. Here's a question.
Hey, Fitz, can I just hop in on that one? It's Mike Cianci as well, the RMDs.
Go ahead, Mike.
Just want to also chime in, and you talk about gifting them into a trust. You absolutely can, and that's a great strategy. We've also, in the past, looked at gifting those funds into a trust and using those funds to actually buy an insurance policy, a life insurance policy. Could be an individual policy. It could be a second to die if you're, if you're married or have a partner. And that's a great way to take an asset that the IRS is requiring you to take at this point, gift it to a trust, move it out of your estate, and then leave a lump sum amount of money through the life insurance policy that's also tax-free, right, to your kids, your grandkids, whoever you name as beneficiaries. So there's just one other option that I've seen out there, and it's actually becoming a lot more popular with the Secure Act. And it's almost like individuals are insuring their IRAs and diversifying the asset itself. So sorry not to cut you off. I just wanted to also mention that as well. No,
listen, it's a team approach. As I said at the beginning, I wanted to bring the full team for this event here, so that all of the participants get an idea of exactly how we work and see the collaboration between our experience and expertise. So thanks, Mike. Here's a question that comes in. I know that in New York, you can receive both Social Security and pension. However, I'm wondering, what if I decide to retire in another state that doesn't allow their educators to receive Social Security benefits, but just their pension? Am I still eligible for my Social Security benefits?
Good question.
It's a great question. And as long as, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. So if you worked under the New York State system, then those are the laws, and your pension is going to follow you no matter where you move to. So the reason that some states and some school systems, they kind of have what they call a pension offset, is because those people actually, I mean, yeah, a windfall elimination pension offset for their Social Security is because those people didn't necessarily put money into Social Security at the same rate that others have, right? It's really a state by state piece. But as long as your pension system is the one here in New York, the laws and the rules within your pension system are going to follow you, whether you move to Puerto Rico or Canada or wherever it may be, or Texas or Florida or wherever else it may be. Those are the laws that are going to follow you. So it doesn't matter what the laws are of the other states' pension.
Perfect. This is a question here, and it's tough. This, we do some real digging here on this one. Which health plan is best to retire in? And as you spoke about this before, Laura, and I see it a lot. Healthcare is a beast in retirement, and if it's not managed properly, you can go bankrupt. I hate to say it like that, but healthcare costs is going up. It's one of those inflationary costs that we just simply cannot control. But which plan, and I'll give it to the team here, which health plan is best to retire with?
So I'm not sure what the question is, if it's meaning like within the Medicare system about the Medigap plans versus the Medicare Advantage plans. I'm assuming that's what the question means.
I think that's
about
what,
which,
yeah, I think that's what the
and the answer is going to be, I can't answer that because I don't know what your situation is, unfortunately. But what I would suggest is that there are some different advisors out there. Trying to think of a website that I have off the top of my head for, first of all, you can go to medicare.gov, I believe is the website. You can get all kinds of information about what makes the most sense. And I believe for your situation, but I want to say that there's a nonprofit group, I believe it's called Shine, S-H-I-N-E, or Smile. I'm getting my nonprofits confused. Forgive me. But there's a group of nonprofit counselors in each state, and they have different acronyms, different fun acronyms, depending on which state you live in, which can help you kind of navigate the different Medicare options and which one is going to make the most sense for you. I would suggest, I'm sure if anybody watches television, that they see all kinds of commercials for call this, there's no cost for this, there's no cost for that. You guys are educators.
Yeah.
There's nothing free like that in this world. No offense to the people that do those, but that's what I would suggest. Because forgive me, I just don't know the names right off the top of my head, but if you Google for like Medicare, nonprofit, counselors, without an agenda, you'll find the names of some different counselors that can help you in your area. Because again, each state has a handful of these and they have different funky acronyms, but I'm sorry, I just can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. It's like Smile or Shine or something to that effect.
Fitzgerald,
yes, sir.
Let me just, if there are folks on here who have those questions who are part of the New York City Educators Association, CSA, Local 1, or AFSA members, we do have some support in that through the New York City Local 1 Welfare Fund, Dr. Doug Hathaway, who would help them navigate some of that and match the city health plan for retirees, as well as what is available out with Medicare, et cetera. So I would suggest that if there are some questions, that they can contact Local 1, Dr. Doug Hathaway.
Perfect. Thank you, Ernie. And while you go right there, Ernie, maybe you can address this as well. Here's a question. Here's a question. It says, I'm OUAS classified staff. Can you cover PERS? PERS
Okay,
per
that,
diem?
an Oakland, I think it's an Oakland administrator.
Okay,
Suggest they contact their local union and get that information from them, or the Oakland Supervisors Administrators Association, and they'll know exactly what's available for them, and they'll be able to direct them to a medical issue specialist.
got it.
And I'll just say that most of our local unions do have some people who are indeed specialists on how to navigate their own individual plans, because there's no plan. I know Laura was very good at this. New York City and New York State is very unique around the country. In fact, the New York City employees are only one of the few places in the country where retirees have free health, non-premium health care.
Yeah, we don't.
Nice.
California.
That's
There
great.
are some unique things that happen in New York State, New York City that don't happen in other places. So,
I have a
And
couple.
just FYI, I Googled it real quick. And so if you put in whatever your state is and Medicare, and the acronym I was trying to think of is SHIP. So it's State Health Insurance Assistance Program, SHIP, SHIP. So
yeah, yes.
make sure that's a P like Paul, not a T like Tom. Just want to make sure I had that straight. And thank you for laughing, Ernie. Thank you for getting the joke.
Fitz, are we ready to move on?
Yes, so we have a couple questions there that's asking, how do we get started? So again, my email address, if you want a consultation, I did receive a number of folks who have attended our events, and we're in the process of getting back to many of you and going through the process. But my email address is fitzmiller@janney.com, fitzmiller@janney.com, to set up a conversation, and then we could get the ball rolling. I know Mike Cianci and I are currently working on a couple of insurance appraisals and long-term care appraisals. It's really, really vitally important that you understand that these components that we're referring to and talking about is important to you living the lifestyle you want to in retirement, okay, and being comfortable. Now, Mike, this is a question, or you or Peter, I'm quite sure Laura will be able to answer this as well. How can the elderly avoid being ripped off by the medical community double billing? And I've seen this. Obviously, the healthcare product, you got to have that, but also there's a law out there, elder care law. Okay, and I'm fierce with this. I hate when I hear elderly people, pre-retirees, being ripped off, oversold, buying products or solutions that does not make sense or fit their life situations. And so my heart is broken with this question, because I see this all the time. How can elderly avoid being ripped off? Just not by the medical community, but also in across the number of industries. So who want to take that?
I mean, I'll chime in a little bit, Fitz, to start.
Yep.
Obviously, you want whoever you choose to work with, right? You want to at least do your due diligence and have a few referrals and find out a few individuals that advisors worked with before. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. There's, I don't know about the double billing and things like that from the the healthcare industry and things, and not being able to pay claims. I don't know enough about Medigap and Medicaid insurance. That's not my specialty, but you definitely, it's anytime your health has changed, for the worse, you want to talk to an elder care attorney. There's no doubt about it, right? Those elder care attorneys specialize in that, and to make sure you're protected when they have different strategies and different methods where they can protect your assets as well.
Perfect. Wondering about setting up a living trust. I guess the question is, should I set up a living trust?
So a living trust, to just kind of remember from the first seminar that we had. So a living trust is often something called a revocable living trust. And I think what you're meaning by that question is, this is where you're going to take your different assets, not your qualified, but like your home and your different investment accounts and your checking and savings accounts, and you're going to retitle it all into a revocable living trust. And the idea of having all those assets in that living trust is that they are going to avoid the probate process, and they're going to make for a very quick, easy transfer of those assets to your beneficiaries. Another valuable piece in having that is that you're going to have somebody who's going to be listed in that document as your successor trustee. So while you're alive, it is always going to be your money when you're alive, and you have the capacity. You can buy the assets, you can sell the assets, you can give them away, you can do whatever you want with them. They're all going to be actually, from tax purposes, under your tax ID number. However, if there's a point in time in the future where you become disabled or you don't have the mental capacity to manage your assets yourself, this is when a guardian, whoever you've listed, or your successor trustee, is actually going to step in, and they're going to take care of all your financial situations for you. And that can be some of the valuable pieces of a revocable living trust. But the main tax benefit of a revocable living trust is it's going to just make sure that your assets transfer to the heirs in a streamlined fashion without going through probate. It does not, however, help you from an estate tax standpoint. We need to make sure that's clear.
Perfect. There are a couple of questions. It's very specific to the individual that sent the questions in, so I'm probably, respectfully, I will respond to them directly. One, I'm planning to retire at the end of this school year and looking to take some personal days. And will it affect, I guess, my options? So I think that's a conversation that I probably want to take offline, and I just wanted to recognize that we did get the question, and I will follow up personally to address that. Some of the questions are really great, but just by way of professionalism, some of the questions are individual, and we run a practice to ensure the confidentiality and the integrity of what we do, and so I try to broaden the questions out so it would be generic as opposed to the specific a person. So bear with me, okay? I will get back to you with those questions. Ernie, I don't know if you can answer this one here. Question came in: are there any early retirement incentives?
I knew that was coming, Vince. There's been nothing on the plate that's being negotiated around the country that I've heard of yet, but it's still early. We're going to see what happens over the summer. There will probably be some that will come out. But that's a good way to end on, Vince. I like that. I'll take it from here. First, let me just thank everybody today for being on the team. Laura, Fitz, Michael, Peter. You guys are phenomenal. I love this team. And let me just say this, that this is AFSA's team, by the way, gang. These are the folks that we use. Fitz is our financial advisor. I've worked with him when I was in New York with Local One. And so it was interesting. Somebody asked, who do you trust? Well, it's interesting. When it comes to financial advice, you have to have reputable people. And I found this company and Fitz to be reputable, very honest and straightforward about what we're doing. And so I would recommend and advise, if you really reach out to these guys, set up a time for a consultation. Let them share with you what your thoughts. I think one of the things I like about Fitz is that he takes his time. He doesn't rush, and he makes you think about where you want to go and what you want to do. Fitz Miller fmiller@janie.com. It's in the chat. Reach out to him. Let me once again just thank you guys at Janie for, just really putting this together. We've had a great series. I want to thank our moderator, Wendy, from West Coast,
Thank you.
Oakland and the West Coast, and all of you who've joined us. And we're going to be doing some additional things. There's an evaluation form we ask that you fill out and turn in. And if you really still have some questions, you can email us at AFSA admin, and we'll pass them on to Fitz and the folks at Janie. So let me just once again thank you all for joining us tonight, and be safe. Continue to be strong.
Yes.
And remember, before you
Ernie, I just want to remind everyone too that we're going to have another webinar on taxes in the beginning of June. So watch for that. And thank you.
That's the one I don't want to deal with taxes, but that's all right. You gotta pay them. Fitz tells me all the time, you gotta pay the taxes, but there are some ways that you don't have to pay as much in taxes as you do. God bless you all. Have a great evening. Thank you, Fitz.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
I appreciate it. Have a good evening, everybody.
Wonderful.
Really? How many people you have?